bonus ep. Is that an appropriate way to start? We've never done a bonus ep. Or we have done some bonus eps before.
Yeah, now they'll have realised they were sadly missing that intro.
Yeah, I mean, we could have done it in post, but why not when you can do it perfectly live?
Yeah, it's very good.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to bring in a little bit of energy into it because this is pretty rare, a little bonus off Broadway, off schedule episode.
Well, I thought it'd be really nice for us to have a quick chat, simply because most people will be unaware that we've recorded a lot of the episodes to the season already, and which we've had to do just because we're really busy and we think it's a nice way to do it. But the issue with that is that I feel like a lot has just happened in the first month of our episodes, and I sort of wanted to just check in and catch up with you guys about some of the stuff because some pretty heavy things have gone.
Yeah.
Happened.
It has been a big month.
It has.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about. Is there specific things that you want?
I had questions for you both. Yeah.
Oh,
I love
okay.
it.
It's been a month of, I felt like we've had some pretty emotionally intense moments, both on the microphone, but also off the microphone. And I feel like if I was someone listening to our podcast, I'd want to know more about some of the things that have happened and how we're going. So I guess I had questions for both of you. Ryan, I'll start with you. I feel like the episode we did with Hamish, which was actually just went out a few days ago, I feel like that was a really big thing for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the most intense hours of my life. I felt like, and it may not have come across in the edit, and people listening may not have picked up on it. But as we said in the last episode, Hamish and I had lunch before it, and I felt like I had to tell you we were doing that because I felt a bit like I just need to tell you. And so when we were having lunch and we were meant to be back here for 1 o'clock and it was like 20 past 1.
To record the episode, yeah.
I was thinking, I feel really, I feel this is not a good thing for some reason. I felt like my gut was telling me it wasn't good.
But when you guys were having lunch and we were like, Josh and I were waiting here for you guys to get here, I started like, my brain was telling me crazy things. And this is just really an extension of what we spoke about in that last episode. And I didn't say last episode, but essentially I was just like thinking they're talking about working together. They're probably talking about starting a podcast together. And I bet that podcast is going to go a lot better than this podcast. And then Hugh will probably think, well, I don't want to do the Imperfects anymore because I've now got this great podcast with Hames. Like that's honestly what I was, that's where my...
Well, so when I walked in here, I just felt like you looked or felt, or there's something about you. I was like, oh, I don't remember. I patted you on the back.
Yeah, you did.
Said,
it was very comforting. Yeah.
Because I felt like there was something, you just felt so different and looked so different and you looked so stressed or like, usually this is such a happy place for you of like, you're so relaxed. And when our guests walk in, one of your strengths is you just make them feel so comfortable so quickly because you're so comfortable. But I felt like it just looked like you were completely peaking. And I went, oh, fuck, I've done something.
No, you haven't done anything.
No, but that's what I felt. And then we had to sit down and do this episode with Hamish, which for everyone who's come to see me speak knows about my opening story with Hamish, how much I just respect and look up to Hamish. And I'm thinking, I really want this to go well. And I could not concentrate on the interview. There was just too much happening. I was like, this is just, when we listened to when I actually got sent the episode of Hamish to listen to, there was so much stuff I heard him saying, well, that was great, but I didn't hear it in the episode.
There
was so much stuff he said I didn't listen to because I was just thinking, is Ryan okay? What's happened here? There's something going on. I'm really stressed. And so I think, picking up on your...
Well, I was already really nervous about that episode, mainly because of what I spoke about, which was the kind of the weird love triangle between the three of us, which I feel so much better about now after having spoken about it with you guys. But I knew that I had that to talk about if the conversation went in that direction, but I didn't really know if I was definitely going to talk about it or not because we weren't necessarily there for that. We were there for Hamish to talk about whatever card he pulled out, you know? And so he was talking about his self-doubt, and when we were talking about that, and then Hugh, when you brought up it's sort of like I became more and more aware of the fact that that this is contextual now to talk about this thing that I'm carrying, which is that I've got this weird jealousy and worry about you two becoming friends. So I was already nervous about it, not knowing if I'd talk about it. So then as it became apparent that we were going to go there, that's when I was like, oh. And while we were doing it, I was so nervous, like unlike any other time.
Could you tell, Josh? Were you, because you seemed very present and you seemed to you were in it totally.
Yeah, I think I was. Maybe I was a bit naive to. I think I really wanted to make it a good podcast, so I was like so focused on just being in whatever would make the podcast good, and just being as present as I possibly could be, that I don't think I was as switched on to what was going on as I usually am. I sort of thought a little bit about it, but I thought probably quite selfishly, I thought if I start thinking about that, I'm going to be shit.
Right. Yeah.
And then I could sort of tell, but I knew there was something going on.
I
was like, well, if I start thinking about that, then none of us are going to be switched on to this podcast at all. So I've got to be switched on.
Because I've never seen you look nervous before, I don't think. And you looked so rocked and I was I was completely freaking out that whole interview.
Right. Well, I was when I watched it back or listened to it back, I definitely sounded and looked a lot less nervous than I felt.
Yeah.
I was really worried after we recorded it. I was like, oh, is that like way too heavy? Did I just absolutely railroad that into something that it wasn't meant to be? I mean, all the time on our podcast, we just kind of go wherever the chat takes us. So I wasn't necessarily worried about that. But when I listened back to it, I thought, oh, okay, that's actually a lot less nervy and tense as I remember it feeling.
Yeah, it definitely looked. Looking back, I don't think you can tell as much, but I was so vastly aware and I couldn't concentrate. And then in my head, I'm going, this interview means a lot, and you cannot even concentrate on what the guest is saying because you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I couldn't tell. I mean, I couldn't tell with you at all. And when we were about to do it, and I was clearly nervous, and Hugh, you could clearly tell that I was. And then you put your hand on my shoulder, like kind of almost privately while other people were talking, and said, "Are you okay?" That was really great.
Wow,
thank you for that. Yeah, because I was freaking out.
Well, I thought I'd done something, so I was like, "What?" I feel like
no, you hadn't done anything. It was more just my inner thoughts,
but then
playing tricks on me.
Yeah, but this is the funny thing about this podcast. Like we've all discussed about this off, like not on the podcast. That I think, Ryan, you said you feel sorry for people who don't have a podcast called The Imperfects. Yeah. Because you don't get an opportunity to talk about things that pop up in your friendship. Something happens in a friendship, you're unsure about it. You just go, oh, what's happened here? What's going on? And you don't talk about it. And so it just, over time, those issues just can grow bigger and bigger and become bigger issues. But because of this podcast, we're able to just, it's pretty rare in a friendship. You have a friendship, someone else's, there's three of you, and then you get to say, hey, how are we going in the three of us?
Yeah.
How's this friendship working? Are we all feeling good here?
Yeah.
Like, it's been amazing. I think it's been an amazing thing that you said that, like for our friendship, for Hamish, for everything.
What it kind of did was it allowed me to kind of get into that uncomfortable space. Well, all of us probably, in whatever episode it is, it allows you to get into that uncomfortable space in a way that is very helpful and practical to us personally, and then hopefully to people listening. But in the case of this, it's like it's an uncomfortable space for us, but at the same time we feel safe because we're on a podcast, and that's the theme of the podcast. Yeah. So it seems like it's warranted.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it isn't possible. If we stopped doing the podcast, next week, which we're not going to do, but if we did.
I was going to say, Hamish and I have got this new podcast where
I fucking knew it. No, so if that happened and I didn't have the podcast anymore, and I was then like, oh, now I'm podcastless, I would like to think that I would still be able to have those conversations, because the thing that I have learned, not only the obvious, which is when you have the conversations with people and you sit in that discomfort for, because it's the discomfort and the awkwardness that stops people from doing it. But that's only going to last, even if it lasts an hour, it's only an hour. And I think now, because I've gone through that, even though it's through the podcast and sort of seeing what's on the other side, because I just have seen for myself, I know how worth it is. Because right now, today, being, what is it like, essentially a week and a half or a week and a half since we recorded that episode with Hames, that whole anxiety around all that has completely diminished. And I now, since speaking about it, and even though it maybe would have seemed obvious to most people, but even hearing you guys say like, well, the things we talk about are like exercise and parenting, it was just so helpful. Not that that's all you're allowed to talk about, but it was so helpful to hear that, that's what you guys get out of that relationship.
And this isn't some big scheme to get rid of me.
Yeah, it's not. And it also has nothing to do with me, whether I'm a good enough or a bad friend, you know, or I'm not providing you guys with enough of the stuff that you need in a friend. And so because I'm not a good enough friend, or you found a shiny and new object, I become useless. Like even though they were the inner thoughts I was having, now having said it out loud, I go like, of course, like that makes so much sense. Like I have lots of different friends and I get lots of different things out of all those different friends. Like I feel like if Josh and I went out, you know, went on a holiday together for like a night, I feel like our experience and what we would do together would probably be really different than like if I went out with you, Hugh. Like we probably, and that's fine. Like that doesn't matter. But I think what I was worried about was, well, Hugh, you and I became really good friends, and then it's like, oh, now you become friends with Hamish. It's like, well, Hamish is better. Hamish is like the better version of me. Like that's like the kind of insecurity that I have, which is through work and the way that our, you know, the careers have gone. That's the worry that you'll be like, oh, Hames is more fun.
I guess if you think about the things that have happened to you in your life and that journey, I understand why I think it's a completely understandable. I mean, it's when you hear it out loud, it's crazy, but it's also understandable.
It is, and it also just is what it is. It's like it's just one of those things that just gradually forms throughout, and everyone has their own little shames and insecurities and stories that they tell themselves which aren't true, and that's one of mine. And so there are lots of triggers for that. But yeah, like I said, speaking about it with people that I trust who just happen to be involved in the situation, it sounds too like easy, but it's not. But like not completely maybe, but if I was at a level 8 out of 10, it's now down at like 2. And that's just literally just from talking about it with the three of us.
Yep.
Definitely becomes easier too, the talking about it. Like once you've had it, once we've done it a few times talking about our insecurities or whatever, you go into it knowing that this is going to go well.
Yeah.
Like this is a safe space.
Totally agree.
Want of a better term. I think what you were talking about before, where it's possible for people to do it themselves without a podcast, I think it's really important for them to do it knowing as long as the other person they're doing it with is willing to meet them at the same level of vulnerability.
Yeah, or at least listen without judgment.
Yeah, because I think there's also nothing worse than putting yourself out there and not being met with the respect and and empathy and vulnerability matched that you deserve. And I don't know if this is the point of the episode. And what you said before, I know you're probably aware of how ridiculous this is, but the phrase you used, Hugh's got a shiny new thing and now I'm useless. It's a huge jump to go from being the shiny thing to completely useless. It's such a dramatic story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was probably being dramatic in saying useless. I don't actually feel that, but it's more like I'm not as interesting anymore. You know, like when the shiny, it's like, you know, a kid gets a new toy and the toy that they loved last week is like, this is the cool new thing. And I want to like play with this all the time.
Yeah.
And then your parents go like, well, what about that toy? We only got, and they're like, yeah, this one's like the new better version though. You know?
Yeah. I said this, I think I sent a message, but like, I think it's a good time just to remind you, but like, I think I said I think I said to you that like meeting you is one of the best things to ever happen to me and Josh.
Yeah,
Genuinely.
Well,
So,
that's lovely, and also the thing that you said, and this was very nice, is that you said that I was like a brother, like a third brother.
Yeah.
Which is so. I think that's exactly what I needed to hear. And God, I know how insecure and possessive this all sounds. But I'm truly and maybe I was a bit possessive, like before we spoke about it, not proudly, and I hate that quality in me when that comes up. But it was there, like it was just there. I didn't, you can't. Sometimes you don't choose your feelings and whatever. But now that's just not there.
Awesome.
And what was really, what it kind of led to was, because after we recorded that, I wanted to kind of like talk to Hames, not on the podcast. I wanted to kind of like put some closure on that without it being public
content. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to write him a message, and I was going to call him, but what I did do, I instead recorded like a voice memo, which went for like 7 minutes essentially of me just saying all the things that I wanted to say, which would have been it would have been a fine thing to do before the podcast, but I think that initial conversation opened the door a little bit for me to be able to do that. But the voice memo, or voice message on text messages that you can send, is a very good way of doing this.
I agree.
Like if you can, because the terrifying bit about speaking to someone and you're getting that immediate feedback is the thing that could make you go like, oh no, they're not taking this well, and then you pull the ripcord and you're like, you get out of it. Whereas if you can get everything you want out of a voice memo, and the key, I reckon, in my experience, is don't listen back to it before you send it. Don't edit it.
Yeah.
Like, just say it. This is obviously assuming that you trust, you feel safe with the person that you're sending it to. But if you have an issue with someone, then you just like record a voice memo, don't listen back to it, and just send it. It's
a nice happy medium between text being maybe a little not quite personal enough for a really meaningful message, and then a phone call.
Yeah.
These days seems to be like a pretty big step to call someone to talk about something. So it's like a nice.
And there are some great emojis, but they don't convey tone quite as well as your own voice.
Well, I think it's, I felt like it was such a, I had to go to Bendigo after the Hamish episode, drive to Bendigo for the show I was doing Bendigo, and I was in such a weird headspace after that interview. I couldn't work out what it was, but I felt, no, I still don't know what it was, but I felt not uncomfortable, but just worried, I think, about you. Or anyway, I having chatted to you the day after, it's just so great. Like, it's just so good. We had that whole conversation for everyone. And for people to listen to go, I think Hamish is right. Like Hamish said, when you talked about how you felt, he said, that'd be common. There'd be so many people who feel like that. And I agree. I've had a lot of messages from people saying I've had the exact same thing. So.
Yeah, same. Yeah. But yeah, well, thanks for checking in.
Oh, it was such a big day. It really was. I think, it was amazing what you did. So,
really brave.
So Josh, my questions for you, I feel like you've provided 2 phenomenal moments already in the first month.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so many people have been reaching out to me just saying how amazing you are, basically, which I've known for a very long time, but it's always nice to get that. I should pass them on to you, actually.
That'd be good.
Hugh's shredding them. What do you think about me, though?
And I don't know which order to go in, but I feel like, I mean, while we're on the Hamish episode, I thought it was like remarkably brave of you to say how you'd felt self-doubt about your role on the podcast, to actually say that on the podcast that you weren't sure about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's probably the most meta moment we've had on the podcast.
I totally agree.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Totally agree. For people who haven't heard the Hamish episode yet, you should definitely listen to it. But Josh, at the end, basically said, you said, you knew that Ryan and I valued you, but now with this incredible team we've got, you wondered how you wondered if they were thinking, what's Josh's role here? Like, is he just here because he's Hugh's brother or because he's got to press the buttons?
Yeah, I think as soon as we stopped recording, I had a chat to Bridget, our producer, about it. And she's so lovely, and she wanted to make sure she hadn't done anything to make sure to make me feel like that. And I was very quick to assure her it's one of those things that is just 100% in my head. And in that conversation, it crystallized pretty quickly that I reckon I've probably, not that the opportunities have come and I've turned them down, but I've avoided working with real, like, how do I say this? I think often I do a lot of projects by myself or with a very small crew of people that I'm really used to working with. And I think I realize that I keep it small and insular with people I know well and trust, because I suffer from a pretty big case of imposter syndrome, in that if I got anyone in who didn't know me that well, the first thing they're going to think is, how the hell has this guy got a job in this career?
Yeah,
a job in this industry. Or how does this guy really think that's a career? This is with stuff I do outside of the podcast.
Yeah.
And it crystallized in that conversation to Bridget that I'm like, oh yeah, I avoid these situations because I feel like I'm always going to get found out.
Right.
And having people involved that I don't know that well on the podcast this year, I'm getting to know really well now. But it was a confirmation of those. It was a situation that I've avoided, I think.
Right.
And was beginning to be confirmation of these things of like, oh, you don't know what you're doing and all that kind of stuff, which I think is probably something that a lot of people feel in work. I think imposter syndrome is probably one of the most common things that exists.
Yeah, and I reckon it's quite common in keeping yourself small.
Yeah.
It's sort of an element of like keeping yourself small or your world small, so there's less of a chance to fail or to be judged.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that all the time.
And I'm always envious of people. And I think I certainly see you as someone like this, Hugh, and I know of other people who in completely different fields are really successful, who have this other switch that it's like, well, I'm going to prove to these people why I deserve to be here. Like I almost relish the competition and the chance, or for some reason I go to competition. I just, but whether that's right or not, but relish that thing of like, well, I'm here. I'm going to show you why I deserve to be here. And I just don't, not to say that I won't have that quality, and and maybe I can develop that, but it's, I've never really had it before for whatever reason. So it was, but being able to say that out loud, it's interesting because I got a really lovely message from someone today that I haven't written back to, saying, I know you're not after external validation, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
And you're like, yes,
bring
it on.
But it's interesting. I thought what Hamish said, that sometimes you need a little bit to let you know that what you're thinking is not right, to snap you into reality a bit. And it's such a tricky thing. I can see negotiating as this podcast becomes more listened to by more people and successful by whatever way you want to define that, but it feels like it's becoming more known and we're getting more feedback. It's such a, to use his phrase, on a different thing, it's a dance with the devil about how you deal with that, a compliment, and how you accept it and how you make sure you keep it in a healthy level of, okay, it's snapping me into reality and not bringing me into a new reality that's also ridiculous.
Whatever is going on inside you, Josh, whatever has like happened in, whatever's made you the person that you are today, that is great, because you're brilliant just now. Like there's nothing else you need to do. Like the reason people are loving what you're doing, and the reason I love you and so many people just connect with you and relate to you, is because of nothing else, I would say, except for like the way that you are is perfect and brilliant because you are you. Like you are.
Weirdly, thank you. Weirdly, I feel like I was thinking about this morning, that when I first started talking on the mic, I thought, what role, like not that I was going to act, but what role am I playing in this podcast? Like, you guys started talking and I was not saying anything, so it was very clearly defined what you do. And I was and it took a while when I was first thinking of what kind of space do I take on this podcast? What do I offer? And strangely enough, I feel like I feel like I'm close to the most authentic version of myself in this podcast. And the format that and the atmosphere that we've created in this room. I think one of the reasons I'm finding this so rewarding is that I feel like all I needed to be was me and be present.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And it's
so good.
Been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, because it's the living of it and the doing of it has been confirmation that you just have to be yourself.
I just love that. I kind of, other than my pec implants, I feel the same way. Like other than them, which are bleedingly obvious, I feel very similar. I feel the same. I'm able to be my authentic self, and like able to just talk about things that I genuinely feel. And I'm very, like I keep saying, I feel like I oversay this, but I'm very wary and cautious of not over egging it in the want of a better episode. And I don't think I do. I think it's all very legit, and I feel a really similar way.
I don't know why this story popped into my head, but it's also something that it's not really, it's because I've moved on from this, but it's something that you said to me when we were working together on one of your Ryan, how do you pronounce it? Ryan?
It's Ryan with 11 Y's.
Yeah.
So
just pronounce it like that.
Just say Ryan, Ryan.com. Yeah.
Yeah. One of you very kindly asked me to help out on a few of those.
Like a sketch.
Sketches that you've been making. And as someone who's grown up watching you and thinking you're one of, if not the funniest person in Australian TV, I've got to say.
I think we've just found our promo. Continue. My new ringtone. To be asked to help, obviously that was a huge moment of triggering the imposter syndrome of like, oh shit, now I'm really going to get found out. And I remember we were talking about how we're going to go about something, and for people out there who, to not get too into the weeds, one of the roles I had was to film, I was to film what you were doing, and one of the roles in that is to sort of work out how it's going to look with you, how we're going to light things and things like that. And I remember I said something to you like, well, I can't make it look like that. And you said, well, you absolutely could if you had the time, but we don't have the time. We're turning this around in a week, so this is what we'll aim for. And it was such a small thing, but to have someone of you say that you could do that, you just need time to work it out. It was such a reframing of the way I would say it to myself, which was, you don't have the skills or the ability to do that. Not that you just need a bit more time and thinking and to think, oh, well, maybe the best people, they just take a bit more time and work it out and have a bit more resources and a bit more money and people around them to support that journey of discovery. It doesn't just happen. And have someone I respect as much as you say that, it just completely, it almost changed the way I look at my own career. Oh, wow.
That one sentence. And it gave me permission to go, oh, okay, you've just got to, you can grow.
That's,
so thank you.
Bad time to say I was joking. Thank you, mate. That's, well, I'm glad that comment. Yeah, because it's true. It is 100% true. It's like, and I'll just say this, we might delete it, but so for people who don't know, in 2020 and 2021, every month I made a new short film or a sketch, and I put it out on a website, and it was like my own creative discipline. And it wasn't funded by anyone. It wasn't on a network or Netflix or anything. It was just me and the few people who were kind enough to help. And that was great. And the reason I did that was to remove the barrier to entry, essentially. So it's essentially meant that I was able to make more things and finish more things without having to get the permission from a network or a funding body or anything like that. So, and I do often think, though, one of the reasons that I really enjoyed that model was that it was fully controlled by me, and it was like you said, Josh, it was sort of not to talk myself down intentionally or anything like that, but it's like I did keep my world small, and I was the one who was able to control all of the elements, from like what the idea is to putting it out on the internet. Like there was no one else that could get in the way of that. And I think I was probably doing a similar thing unintentionally, which is keeping the world small and not putting myself too much out there or on a ledge, because if I go and pitch it to a network or something, there's the chance that they'll say no.
Yeah.
But if I never do that, then no one's telling me no, and I never have to face that discomfort or that potential rejection. And if you never do that, this is maybe too grand of a statement, but if you never do that, you never really grow.
Yeah.
And I think it's like what you're talking about. If, I think now as I've stopped doing that monthly thing and I start to think about going back into the world of pitching shows to networks, I'm back in that world of like giving up control potentially to other people and putting my ego on the line essentially and seeing what happens. And I found myself in the last couple of days actually thinking, why don't I just go back to that monthly thing? Because it's like that was fun and easy, and risk was very low.
Very safe.
Very safe. And that suits me very well because I'm not a huge risk taker. My risk appetite is very low.
Yeah.
But the more and more you, like exactly what you're saying, Josh, you only get better or learn more or grow if you're putting yourself out there and taking risks and all that sort of stuff. It's gone on a massive tangent, but I think that's a big thing that I've learned in the last little while.
Yeah,
I really
still
relate.
learning.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a really good lesson to learn. Yeah, failure's it's a really good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is, or even like risk of failure.
Yeah.
And Josh, the other moment that I just want to, I don't know if I want to talk about it, but just acknowledge you do this for so many episodes. I feel like even with the Hamish one we just talked about, we'll all be chatting and there's a feeling in the room and it's going well, and then you'll say something and the whole feeling in the room just sort of shifts and it makes it about me. No.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it does, but
that's all right.
Yeah, but you do it in a way that I feel like you just take the interviews to the next level. And I know this is, I guess we're talking what we spoke about just then about your self-doubt, but you sort of have this way of taking interviews to a whole new place. And you did it with the Johann episode. And we shared on social media at the Imperfects podcast on Instagram, the really raw moment that you said to Johann you had an issue with addiction with the internet ever since Georgia, our sister, became sick. And it was for me, it felt like the most powerful moment I've experienced on this podcast. I was just
absolutely. Yeah.
I a little bit like what I said about Ryan before when I walked into the room and felt like something wasn't quite right with Ryan. As that interview was going on, so the three of us are sitting quite close, so Johann could see us. And about halfway in, Ryan and I had so much to say because we'd been experimenting with no phones.
And we'd read the book. And
we'd read, yeah. And so I was feeling like, I feel really bad that Josh hasn't had a chance to get in here. Like, we haven't even given you a chance. And I looked across to you and you were looking down and it looked to me like your hands were shaking. I don't know if they were.
I'm not sure.
But it looked like your hands, and you were looking down and I thought, oh shit, something's wrong with Josh. I didn't put two and two together and think it was anything to do with the interview. But I had a moment of thinking, do we need to stop? I think I need to check if you're okay. But the way Johann goes, when he's in flow, it's just so hard to sort of stop him. And I thought there was a moment of thinking, I think I need to stop Johann so I can check Josh is okay. And then, but the next time he stopped, I sort of looked at you as if I was thinking, I don't know what to do here. I don't have to say, do you want to ask a question? And that's when you said that. So it was clearly a lot going on for you in the build up to that question that you asked around your issues with addiction to internet.
Yeah, I think the build up was, it's pretty obvious why, but I've always ironically I think it even feels weird to say it. I don't think I've said it out loud since then, but for an addiction that wastes so much time, it's ironic or kind of tragic that I feel so not panicked, but just the idea of wasting time considering we don't have that much of it is just so distressing to me and wasting a life. So I think that's what, and I was hearing over and over all these things that you're doing to your brain by not having proper focus and being sucked into the wormhole that is the internet and not so much social media for me, more internet in general, but social media is a huge part of it. It was like I was seeing so much of my life wasted in front of me. And so I was getting very anxious and very emotional. And that's why it sort of came out in that way. It's been a really strange experience to have that out in the world as well, because to have so much of, I think everything I've ever spoken about on the podcast, I've really processed quite a lot. And I think I'd been in denial about that a bit, or at least not facing up to it. I think I knew it was a problem, but not facing up to it. So to be right in the middle of something and live it out, not live, but effectively live in front of a lot of people, it's been very strange. Immediately after that, I felt like that day and the day afterwards, I don't think I've ever been so efficient. Like I was so switched on. I didn't get distracted by anything. I was amazing. Got so much work done. Went home feeling so good about myself. And then and I bought a K-Safe, as he said. He gets a lot of money from
I got one too, yeah.
Yeah, bought a
Did
K-Safe.
you really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got to get one and not use it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. K-Safe and a home phone, because I was like, I'm going to put my phone in there and use it.
You bought a home phone?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Cordless? Yep, but I haven't plugged it in.
Right.
Yeah, and I've used the K-Safe twice, I think, in what's been about a month.
I haven't used it yet.
Yeah. And then when the episode was going out, well, I kind of got, so I started off really well, 2 great days. And then I sort of started to fall back into old habits and things started to creep in, as I'm sure anyone who's dealt with this or any kind of addictive behavior would know. It started to go into the bad habits again. And then as this episode was starting to come out, I got a bit anxious about whether we should put that video. I was a bit self-conscious about it, but thought, no, it's important that people can see. Hopefully it alerts other people who are going through similar things. But then when it went out, I was like, that day I would have checked social media more than I ever have in my life.
Of course.
Because I was like so nervous about what people would be saying about it and thinking. And weirdly, I was seeking compliments and self-validation to go, you're okay, and support. But it meant that I got into a really bad habit of, I just didn't get a single thing done that day, and it really reinforced the problem. And then I feel like over the last week, I think I've been worse than ever with distraction, procrastination and addictive behaviors, with going down YouTube wormholes and all sorts of bullshit. Yeah. And so I don't know. I'm very much in it. Like I don't know if it's the appropriate place to say to people out there, if anyone has been to places that have helped, like if they know strategies, or because you sent me a website of this place up in Sydney that looked like a really interesting thing to go to.
Internet Addiction Rehab Centre, I think it was.
Yeah. Which looked really interesting, and it felt so. When I first read it, I'm like, oh God, I'm not that bad. It looks like you've got a drug addiction and you're going to a drug. Not that I'm blaming anyone with drug addiction, but it felt like
it didn't seem that intense,
that weighted or that big. But then the more I've been sucked back into it, I'm like, no, I really want to deal with this. And I couldn't see anywhere in Melbourne that was good. I'm sure there is, but I couldn't find it. So I guess I'm sort of putting out to people out there, if you know of somewhere that's good, please reach out and suggest it, because I'd be interested.
Awesome.
That's great. I wonder if they make a K-Safe that is big enough for a person to get into. So instead of putting your phone and locking your phone away, it's just like, I just don't trust myself. So just lock me in the K-Safe 3 hours a day.
Or maybe just your hands.
Oh, that's true. K-Safe hands. Yeah, we'll look into that.
Siri would. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I thanks so much for that discussion, because I feel like, I mean, those 2 moments that we've spoken about, not only did I feel a huge emotional moment or significant for both of you, but I felt it physically. Like it's a real physical reaction from both of you to how intense those moments were. And yeah, I think it's nice to, I don't know, reflect on them. And sorry, not to say you guys had those. I also had it with Hamish's episode. I completely maxed out, completely maxed out for pretty much the whole episode.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think, the conversation we've had today, I think is a really good one, just to reaffirm everything that we're feeling and thinking. And yeah, definitely if you've been through what Josh has been through and you know of a good place. I know there's a really good place in I think it's Los Angeles that Johann Hari talks about as an internet addiction place. But any local places, please let us know because I'd be fascinated.
I'm also fascinated just from an intellectual exercise as well to learn more. I'd be interested to know if I'm like I don't know. It's as he said, it's a serious problem in the world and I think more needs to be done, and I've got to look at myself first.
Yeah.
It is. Well, and Hugh, on my behalf, from me. Probably don't to say that when I speak. Like I can just say it. Well, on Ryan's behalf, I'd like to say, thank you for your understanding and sensitivity. You're always you're never judging. And I think you take, whatever I bring up or talk about, there's never, ever any sort of worry that you're going to ever think like, oh, that's a bit weird, or don't worry about it, or oh, you're being stupid, or there's never anything like that. And I really do now quite often, I don't know if I've told you this, but I do often when I'm reacting to things or listening to people, or if someone's telling me someone, I do think of you and try and like emulate how you approach or how
lovely.
You listen to people and how you talk to people.
Thank you.
Because it is, I think I'm getting better at that from watching you do it.
Oh, that's really lovely. Thank you. Do you want to take us out with a bit of a bonus? Or
thanks everyone for listening to our bonus app.
There you go. We'll have our original format out on Monday. Do we say who it is?
Yeah.
It's Luke McGregor.
Luke McGregor. Not the Luke McGregor, a different Luke McGregor. No, the Luke McGregor. Stand-up comedian.
Yeah. We'll chat to you Monday, guys. See ya.
Ciao.
Bye.
If this episode has been triggering for you, we strongly recommend Lifeline on 131114. The Imperfects is hosted and co-produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton and Josh Van Cuylenberg. This episode was produced by Bridget Northeast, edited by Andy Hall, filmed by Andy Poole and social mediated by George Martin. A special thanks to Dr. M for her expertise and guidance. We'd also like to thank the Resilience Project for their ongoing support, and of course a big thank you to No Mono for allowing us to use their track Keep On as the theme to this episode. Our acknowledgement of country was delivered today by Jesse Motlock, and you can find Jesse's podcast, Deadly Discussions, on YouTube. Thanks for listening.